The concept of the five love languages is from a book originally by Gary Chapman. The basic idea is pretty simple. Each person has their own love language that means the most to them. And they has them in five categories: acts of service, physical touch, words of affirmation, quality time, and receiving gifts. And what this means is that for you to feel loved, one or more of these five love languages are the ones that will strike you the most, that will make you feel loved most strongly or most likely. For some people, physical touch means a lot, and words you say means almost nothing. And for some people, it's just the opposite. Same with quality time, receiving gifts, acts of service. This is one of those things that until you find out about it, you might never have thought about it. But once you see it everywhere. And you realize that there are people that, have a good relationship in other ways, but neither one of them feel really loved. So you could have, say, a husband, acts of service is what means the most to him, right? And a wife that words of affirmation is what means the most to her. And so he wants to express his love for her, so he's going around doing acts of service for her. So he's out there mowing the lawn, and he's, he does the dishes, and he changes the oil in her car. He vacuums. Meanwhile, he doesn't ever tell her how much she means to him. He doesn't tell her how beautiful she is. He doesn't tell her anything. He doesn't give her any words of affirmation, which is her love language, right? So he's kind of really going out of his way to express to her how much he loves her, but he's using his love language, the thing that means the most to him. For somebody whose love language is acts of service, that's what means the most, and that's what really would get through to him if somebody wanted to express their love for him. That's what he would notice. That's what he would value. And if they said, I really like you, I really love you, you're really a good person, it would mean nothing to him. He doesn't value that channel, right? So, and then his wife, who really values words of affirmation, feels starved of love, even though he's going way out of his way to express to her how much she means to him. And then she's doing the opposite. She tells him all the time how great he is, how handsome he is, how what a wonderful husband he is. And for him, that lands on deaf ears. He doesn't even really care about that. I mean, it's nice, but no big deal. It doesn't make him feel loved. So he's over there starving for love, and she's going way out of her way to make sure that he knows how much she loves him. It's sad, and it's tragic, and it's super common. I read a book a long time ago, long before Chapman's book came out, and I think that's why Gary Chapman's book really struck a nerve for me, because I thought he really improved what I had read before. So what I had read before was a book by the spouse of Richard Bandler, who's the guy that started neuro-linguistic programming, or NLP. And she was a therapist, couples therapist, and she was talking about how this basically the same phenomenon happens, only the way that NLP divides things up is different. Basically, everybody has a representational system that they care the most about. And a representational system means just the way that you represent the world to yourself. So you could be, for example, a visual person, so you can represent the world to yourself in your images, right? Internal images. And then there's also auditory, and there's kinesthetic. There's almost nobody primarily represents the world to themselves gustatorily or olfactorily, right? With their smell or their taste. It's what they see, what they hear, what they feel. And basically, in the same way that somebody could be, that people are either right-handed or left-handed or ambidextrous, in other words, they favor one hand over the other. In the same way, people favor a representational system over the others. So they favor visual representations over auditory and kinesthetic, or they favor auditory over visual or kinesthetic, right? That means, and they have this information for salespeople, for example. If you want to reach the client that you're talking to, and you really want them to get what you're saying, and you want it to really reach them, and they're a visual person, then you should be speaking in terms of visual images. You should be talking about how bright this will make their kitchen, or how colorful it will be, or how it will look to others. See what I mean? So that's a visual language. I could also say, does that sound good to you? That's auditory language. If the salesperson is talking to somebody whose primary representational system or favored representational system is auditory, then you would want to talk to them in terms of auditory descriptors. It'll sound so great in there. There will be almost no echo. You could even make your voice while you're talking to them sound soothing, auditorially pleasant. They're tuned into auditory things more than they are to visual and kinesthetic. So if you're a salesperson and you happen to be visual and you're talking to a kinesthetic client, it often happens that the two of you don't mesh very well, right? Because you're talking about how it's going to look and how colorful it is or whatever, and a kinesthetic person is sitting there going, yeah, but what is it going to feel like? Kinesthetic means bodily feelings. Is it going to be comfortable? Is it going to be soft? These are kinesthetic descriptors. These are feeling descriptors, which is what you would want to say if you're a salesperson. But the same thing applies to relationships, of course. So you could have a visual person, a person who favors visual representations, married to somebody who's kinesthetic. And the same thing will happen. The visual person will show his spouse how much he loves her, and she, who's kinesthetic, will try to make him feel good. She'll rub his shoulders and, buy nice, comfortable sheets for the bed, doing things that she would value, but he doesn't value as much. I mean, he might still value them some, but that's not his primary representational system. That is not the category of representations that he values the most, that he pays attention to the most. Anyway, so the 5 love languages are very, they basically took that insight and ran with it. So really, these are 2 ways of looking at a very similar thing, and very worth looking at. Because if the representational system that you favor is not the same as your spouse, then it's worth knowing that. And when you want your spouse to know and feel that you love her or him, you would want to express yourself in that representational system or love language. I'm just going to stick with love languages because I think it's a better and more descriptive way of thinking about this. So the most important thing to find out would be, what is your spouse's love language? And then learn to express your affection for him or her in that love language, and not in the one that you favor, if they're different, and they probably are. And this is somewhat unnatural. I mean, when people first get together, they do them all. They use all the love languages. They touch each other, they say things to each other, they give gifts, they spend quality time together, and they do acts of service for each other. But as time goes on, people tend to streamline their expression. It's not a full-time thing anymore. They now are living their lives together. They have to go to work, they have things to do, they have important things to talk about and stuff like that. They tend to streamline. And they tend to streamline using the love language that they care the most about, without knowing that their spouse may not really care about that one as much. So how do you know? How do you find out what your spouse's love language is? Well, one way to find out, one indicator is what they tend to do for you when they want to express their love for you. Do they do acts of service? Do they give you gifts? Are they constantly asking to just spend time with you? That would be quality time. Another indicator is what hurts them the most. So somebody who values, whose love language is words of affirmation, is also more hurt by words of criticism. Somebody whose love language is physical touch is more hurt by the withdrawal of physical affection. Another good indicator also is what your spouse most often asks for or complains that she or he doesn't get. And after you've found out what the love language is of your spouse, then learn, like you're learning another language, learn to express your affection in that love language. And that may take a little bit, and it may feel uncomfortable, just like it does when you're first speaking a language. If you've ever learned another language, you know, it feels awkward, it feels clumsy, you're not good at it. It feels like you're pretending, or it just doesn't feel natural. But after a while, I mean, if you keep speaking the language, after a while, it feels very natural and very comfortable. But why should you do this? I mean, shouldn't you just be yourself? Yes, but you're communicating your love for the other person for the other person. You're trying to express that love for the other person. So it's not really about you. It's not about what's comfortable for you. It's about how the other person is going to feel. You're trying to have an impact on your spouse. You want them to feel your affection for them. You want it to get through to them. So you use what's going to get through to them, not what's most comfortable for you. I remember in the book, somebody asked that question. He's like, it was a man whose wife's love language was physical touch, and that was not his. And he said, but Dr. Chapman, I'm just not a toucher. My family wasn't a toucher. When I was growing up, nobody ever really touched each other. It feels really awkward. I'm just not that kind of person. And Chapman was like, you have arms, right? If you held your arms out like this and then just brought them in, wouldn't you be hugging your wife? I mean, are you capable of doing that? Come on, you're doing this for her. I thought that was a great answer. So that's the 5 love languages: acts of service, physical touch, words of affirmation, quality time, receiving gifts. You can easily find this list online. So find out what your spouse's is, find out what yours is, make sure you each know each other's, and it will really make a difference. This has been one of the few things that I've learned about relationships that actually made a difference. And I'm not alone with that. There's a lot of people that once they get this, they go, and it explains a lot of what hasn't been working and gives you a pathway that can make it work well. So try it, use it, experiment with it. I hope it makes as much of a difference to you as it did to me. This is Adam Lee Kahn on The Atom Bomb. This Atom Bomb podcast episode is sponsored by Anchor, a podcast platform, the one I'm using to make this podcast. It's super easy to use and allows you to easily create your own podcast. You can record and edit your audio right onto the app. In fact, you can do everything on your phone. Anchor also makes it easy to monetize your podcast and get wide distribution. Anchor automatically makes your podcast available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and more. You can download the Anchor app for free or go to anchor.fm to get started.